If I asked you right now to picture power, what image jumps to mind?
Well, for most people, it's probably a massive structure.
Yeah, like a government building, a corporate boardroom, or maybe just a boss standing over your shoulder.
Exactly. We're all conditioned to see power as this centralized thing.
Something that specific people or institutions have?
It's the classical model, really.
Yeah.
Power is something you either have or you don't. It's the ability to say no.
Right. But what if that traditional view is, well, fundamentally flawed? What if the real force that shapes our realities, that defines our identities, and sets the boundaries of what's normal, is something distributed everywhere?
Flowing through social capillaries.
And is, crucially, being generated and maintained by you.
That is the radical shift we're making today. Our mission is to take the foundational, the really revolutionary ideas of the philosopher Michel Foucault.
That power is relational and decentralized.
Exactly. And synthesize them with complex adaptive systems theory. We are moving beyond just philosophical critique into a systems-level analysis of society and, ultimately of modern identity itself.
The source material we've gathered for this deep dive is just fascinating. It blends Foucault's post-structuralist critique of how institutions create the self with cutting-edge complexity science.
And systems dynamics. Together, they give us this powerful new vocabulary.
A vocabulary for understanding the self not as a singular ego, but as a constantly emerging network. We're really offering you a shortcut to understanding the mechanics of control and agency in the 21st century. So let's start at the beginning with Foucault's core revolution. Okay, let's unpack this. For a lot of people, this idea that power isn't held by a single entity, it just feels counterintuitive.
It really does.
How did Foucault fundamentally redefine it?
He stripped it of its capital P. He argued that power isn't a thing you possess. It's a dynamic set of relationships, a strategy.
He called it the microphysics of power, right?
Yeah, that's it. Think of it like an oceanic force. Always present, always flowing through every single interaction between a doctor and patient, a teacher and student.
Parent and child.
Exactly. It's diffuse, it's omnipresent, and crucially, it's subjectless.
Wait, if it's subjectless, how does it operate? It sounds like you're saying there's no person in charge, which makes it sound abstract, impossible to fight.
That's a great question, and it's where Foucault is often misunderstood. He wasn't saying no one has influence, but that power operates through these broad, often non-intentional strategies. He was drawing on Machiavelli's concept of relations of force.
So the effects are real.
Oh, very real. But they don't necessarily stem from a conscious decision made by some mastermind. The system of relationships itself generates the strategy.
Like traffic patterns.
That's a perfect analogy. No one person controls the flow, but the collective interactions create these predictable, powerful constraints on movement.
So it's less about who says no and more about the entire environment, the rules, the discourses, what's seen as acceptable behavior that determines what's even possible in the first place.
Precisely. And this leads to his most critical and maybe most non-intuitive insight. Power is generally positive, or maybe a better word is productive.
Productive. We usually think of power as negative. It restricts, it prohibits.
It punishes. And Foucault said, yes, it absolutely does those things, but its primary function is to produce.
Produce what?
It produces knowledge. It generates identities. It creates what he called rituals of truth. So, for example, power doesn't just prohibit certain sexual acts. It produces the very category of the homosexual and all the knowledge around that, which then needs monitoring and defining.
It creates the boxes we put ourselves in, normal or abnormal.
Exactly. Power produces the very categories we use to understand ourselves and the world.
That's a profound shift. And this production, it happens most powerfully in the modern age through what he called disciplinary power. This is the quiet, almost gentle form of control, right?
It's insidious because it operates through normalization. And it happens in institutions we tend to trust.
Schools, hospitals, offices.
Right. The goal isn't always to inflict pain, but to calibrate and standardize behavior. We internalize the rules. The classic illustration he uses is the panopticon.
The circular prison.
A prison design where inmates know they might be watched at any moment, so they constantly self-regulate their behavior.
So surveillance, or even just the potential for surveillance, becomes internalized.
Correct. The system produces the subject. It's a process Foucault termed subjectification. It makes you the type of person who is controllable and predictable because you monitor yourself.
You become your own guard.
You become your own guard. That's it, exactly.
And that internalized self-regulation, it connects directly to his famous power knowledge link. It sounds like you can't even define normal without an underlying power structure to enforce that definition.
They're absolutely inseparable. Every exercise of power relies on a specific form of knowledge to legitimize itself, and every form of knowledge emerges within a web of power relations.
Which is why he was so skeptical of the Enlightenment's faith in pure reason.
He argued that rational discourses in medicine, psychiatry, law can function as really sophisticated forms of domination. They mask power by presenting constructed categories, like deviant or mentally ill, as if they're natural objective truths.
This critique is so compelling, especially because he wasn't coming from, say, a classical Marxist perspective.
No, not at all. Foucault insisted that power effects are material and operate directly on the body, how you stand, how you speak, how you work, not just on abstract ideas like ideology.
He wanted to understand the actual mechanisms.
He did. He focused on destabilizing present certainties by using genealogy, examining how things that seem so natural today were actually radical historical accidents yesterday.
But that approach does draw criticism, right?
It does. The critique is often that Foucault provided this brilliant diagnosis of how power works, but he left very little instruction for how to organize politically against it.
That's a key point. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's transition from that abstract philosophical critique to the mechanics. If power is everywhere, how do we actually track its impact? The sources talk about systems creating their own nodes of expression.
Right. If Foucault showed us power flows like an ocean, systems theory helps us map the currents. Think of the flow as moving through capillaries, not just these big arteries.
And the nodes are where the power becomes visible.
The nodes of expression are the points where this flow becomes manifest. It could be an individual person, the specific technology, a policy, or a particular discourse. These nodes are where power relations are embodied and reproduced.
Okay, can we ground this? Give us a concrete, modern example of a node in action.
Let's take a social media platform. The platform itself is a complex adaptive system. The algorithm is a node.
Designed to maximize engagement.
Right, but every user is also a node. So when you post something that gets heavily filtered for appropriateness or engagement potential, the algorithm is acting as a node of disciplinary power. It's encouraging self-censorship, normalization.
But then I, as a user, click like on certain content.
And at that moment, you are acting as a node. You're adjusting the algorithm and influencing the norms for thousands of other people.
So those interactions create a self-reinforcing loop. My behavior influences the system, and the system influences my behavior.
And that brings us to a core term from the source material: reciprocal reflexivity.
The engine of the network.
It really is.
Yeah.
Reciprocal reflexivity defines that mutual influence between the agents, you, the individual, and the system you're in. You are never purely a victim or purely an author.
You're both.
You are both a subject and an agent of power. You're shaped by the network through subjectification, but every choice you make actively shapes and shifts that network's trajectory.
So if I start consciously posting different content or seeking out marginalized voices, that tiny change, if it's multiplied across thousands of users, it could eventually force the system to evolve its own algorithm.
Yeah, precisely. The power isn't centralized in the algorithm. It is constantly being constructed and reconstructed through that reflexive loop between the system and its nodes.
It's shared, it's mutually constructed, it's constantly shifting.
And understanding that is what moves us from just philosophical critique to practical intervention.
Which leads us directly to application. Now that we understand this decentralized, reflexive model, how can we use this knowledge to design better systems? Whether those are digital platforms, organizations,
Or even social movements.
This is crucial for you, the learner, because it's where theory translates into application.
If the problem is normalization through this kind of invisible distributed power, the solution has to be increasing visibility and distributing agency. The sources focus on 4 key areas here.
Okay, let's start with data. Decentralized data sovereignty. That sounds like taking back control.
It is exactly that. It means recognizing that the individual is a powerful node that can and should resist these top-down surveillance models. So this involves developing things like blockchain or peer-to-peer tech.
To give people true self-governance over their data.
Exactly. It reduces reliance on centralized authorities and promotes system resilience through distributed control.
Okay, next up, there's a diagnostic tool. Reflexive power mapping.
This is essentially network analysis applied to social dynamics. We can use sophisticated tools to track and visualize how individual actions, a policy change, a new technology, a viral campaign, cumulatively alter the system's norms.
So by mapping these capillary flows,
We can make targeted, nuanced interventions to shift collective norms intentionally, rather than just waiting for change to happen.
the third application involves designing systems that are constantly learning.
We call them adaptive self-regulating systems. Imagine an AI-driven learning platform, or even a decentralized workplace. These systems monitor behaviors and adjust their norms and incentives in real time based on collective feedback.
It blurs the line between the subject and the system.
It does. It fosters these highly empowered agents who are actively participating in shaping the rules they operate under.
And finally, critical self-reflective technologies. We need tools to see how we're participating without even realizing it.
If the panopticon makes us feel watched, these technologies make the power structure visible. Developing apps or interfaces that show you how your personal behavior, your scrolling, your sharing, feeds back to influence algorithms or societal norms.
That transparency fosters conscious participation.
And agency. It creates space for resistance and critical reflection within systems that otherwise just encourage passive normalization.
Okay. We've established Foucault's distributed power, how it flows through nodes, and how we can apply that knowledge. Now, we take the big leap into the metasynthesis. The sources combine Foucault's power topologies with complexity science and traditional sociology, like Cooley and Mead.
And this creates a radical new idea of what you even are.
Let's get into it.
This is where we define identity, not as a singular, static self sitting inside your head, but as the CA self, the complex assemblage self.
Okay.
Think of your identity as an emergent, non-linear system, a swirling ecosystem of roles, habits, and impulses. The boundary between your psyche and society isn't a solid wall. It's a permeable membrane.
A permeable membrane. So my interior identity is shaped by society, and in turn, society is a reflection of many internal identities.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's like looking at interior identity as a society of mind and exterior society as a mind of societies.
Wow.
And Foucault's power concepts fit perfectly into this internal society through what the sources term the power genome. If society is always selecting for individuals, for nodes who maximize its stability,
Then our internal psyche operates the same way.
exactly.
So we have these internal voices, right? Different parts of ourselves, the responsible worker, the chaotic friend, the parent. Are those the nodes in our personal network?
They are. Your various subpersona, your habits, your competing impulses, they self-organize into nodal clusters within your psyche. They compete for expressive bandwidth, for power and attention.
And this internal selection pressure, the power genome, is always prioritizing the clusters that help the whole system, the CAS self, survive in its environment.
Precisely. And the nodal ontology just describes the functional existential weight or power resonance of those internal and external nodes. If your responsible worker node has high nodal ontology, it dictates more of your behavior.
And if the rebellious artist node has low ontology, it stays quiet.
For now.
This complexity, it extends beyond just the present moment. The sources introduce the transdimensional anectonomy. This sounds incredibly academic. What's the simple translation?
It just means that the CAS self exists across multiple dimensions at once, not just physical, but psychological and temporal. Let's break it down into 3 key areas for the learner.
Okay, start with the internal landscape, the participial multiplex.
The participial multiplex is that inner plurality, is the entire cast of internal actors.
Yeah.
Your subpersona, the versions of you that exist only online, your virtual selves, and even those counterfactual timeline variants.
The you that might have been.
Right. They're all interacting, negotiating, and competing for power inside your head right now. It's like an internal democracy where different roles are always struggling for dominance.
That makes a lot of sense. We often feel like different people in different situations. What about the spatial dimension, orthospatial identity?
Or orthospatial identity recognizes that your sense of self is distributed across overlapping spaces. The you that is present physically is different from the you represented by your digital footprint, which is different from the you defined by your job title or your family status.
And when those conflict, that's tension in the system.
That's tension within your orthospatial system, exactly.
And then the temporal dimension, chronoresonance selving, we are influenced by the past, obviously, but you said we are also influenced by our future.
Absolutely. Chronoresonance selving is the process where past, present, future, and potential selves co-generate each other through constant feedback loops. The critical insight here is chronosynthetic reflexivity,
Which is,
a retrocausal influence of anticipated futures.
hold on, retrocausal influence. You mean my future self is shaping my present actions?
Yes, in a very practical sense. If you anticipate that you will achieve a certain professional status in 5 years, that anticipated future self exerts pressure on your present behavior. It forces you to adopt habits and norms today that align with that future.
So your expected future is actually causing present identity formation.
That's it. It's mind-bending, but highly practical.
So if the CA self is this nonlinear network with all these internal and external parts, how does it manage itself without a central boss, without an ego in charge? How does it learn and adapt?
It governs itself through hermeneutic autoreflexivity, or, more simply, emergent self-steering.
Yeah.
Like any complex adaptive system, it lacks a central controller. Instead, it relies on constant feedback loops.
You act, society reacts.
You interpret that reaction, and that interpretation feeds back into your self-image, modifying your next action.
It sounds incredibly sensitive.
It is.
Yeah.
The system exhibits microperturbation sensitivity. A single small interaction, a piece of feedback from a colleague, a minor conflict, a meaningful compliment, can dramatically reorganize the internal assemblage of nodes.
And kick the whole identity trajectory onto a different path.
A completely different path. And critically, the system exhibits autodidactic adaptive learning. It constantly refines its strategies, its habits, and its self-metaphors without conscious, centralized instruction.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? We started with the idea that power isn't possessed by a king, but is participatory and relational, flowing through systems. That's from Foucault. And we end with the realization that your identity is an emergent, nonlinear network, a CS self, that is constantly shaped by and actively shaping the world around it.
This framework is incredibly empowering because it makes the reflexive nature of power visible. When you truly grasp the transdimensional kinetonomy, that yourself is multiple, spread out, and temporal, you gain the ability to work toward what the sources call multiplex persona synergy.
Aligning your internal actors.
Yes, aligning those competing sub-personae for more coherent expression and greater, more conscious agency in the world.
Since the CA self is highly susceptible to microperturbation sensitivity, where a tiny conscious shift can reorganize entire network trajectories, and is constantly engaging in autodidactic adaptive learning, we leave you with this final thought.
What one small conscious change in your daily behavior or your self-narration could you introduce today to intentionally perturb and reshape your identity network toward the self you are anticipating?